Today on the channel, it's the return of the Kyle Peterson Top 5, and today we're taking a look at one of the greatest wrestling managers of all time as we're doing the Top 5 Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart figures of all time.
The spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another edition of the Kyle Peterson Top 5 list, a Thursday tradition here on the channel, and we're counting down my top 5 favorite of something, and today we're counting down my top 5 Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart figures of all time. And a gun to my head right now, is it possible that Jimmy Hart has the most wrestling figures of any manager in history? I would have to think that is the case. He got a ton of Jax figures back in the day. Of course, he had an LJN. He had a retro-style Mattel. He's had a bunch of different Mattel figures over the last couple of years. I have to think, I mean, Bobby Heenan's had some figures, but I think Jimmy Hart has him edged out at this point. So Jimmy Hart, really, at the end of the day, I think part of contracts and things. Heck, you even got original San Francisco toy maker figures of Jimmy Hart. I forgot to mention those as well. So really, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to Jimmy Hart is the greatest action figure wrestling manager of all time because he's had the most figures. Well, maybe not quite, but he does have some sleeper figures, and a lot of managers are sleeper figures. Because a lot of people want the stars. They want the Warrior, the Macho, the Cena, the Hogans, you name it. But you got to have the manager, especially if it's a guy that had a manager, especially somebody like Jimmy Hart, as iconic as he has been over many, many years. And very underrated. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people think of Jim Cornette, Bobby Heenan. Personally, for me, Gary Hart's at the top of my list. But Jimmy Hart's in there just enough to be dangerous. And I especially had greater respect for Jimmy Hart going back later in life, watching a lot of Memphis TV, the Jerry Lawler era, stuff like that, him and his first family, and of course, the Andy Kaufman time frame. Jimmy Hart owes a lot to wrestling managers back in the day. He was just something extra special. And then, of course, going to this WWF run, which most people are familiar with starting off with the Hart Foundation, was kind of the first time I think I really remembered Jimmy Hart as a little kid. But, of course, going on with Hulk Hogan back in the day, the Dungeon of Doom, you name it. He's a guy that's been around and still is around. He was just on Raw 30 not too long ago, still making autograph appearances, things like that. So Jimmy Hart, probably the hardest working manager in the business these days, I would have to say, after all these years. And we're, of course, going to count this down like we do all the other countdowns on the channel. We're going to start at number 5, work our way to number 1, and I'm going to ask you guys, as I always do, make sure you get your list together. Make sure you put it in the comments down below. Make sure you put them in order. That is the hard part. Remember, this is my list. Let's see your list. Put it in the comments down below. So without further ado, let's get after it. Let's start at number 5 in the Jimmy Hart countdown. We begin the countdown at number 5, and number 5 comes from possibly my favorite wrestling toy line of all time. You guys know what that is. It is Jax Classic Superstars. But we go all the way back to 2006. Oh, what a time to be alive. And we take a trip to the old toy fair for the 1 of 100 Jax Classic Superstars Toy Fair exclusive Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart. And at the end of the day, his rarest action figure of all time because there's only 100 of these guys made. But Jimmy Hart, very, very cool. Have to have this in a protective case, as you can imagine. Now, Jax Classic gave us many, many Jimmy Harts. We got him in a couple of different 3-packs. We got solo card. We got this exclusive one. They really went all out with different versions of Jimmy Hart. There's just something extra special about this one. So special, in fact, I had to get 2 of them. So I had to get a loose one as well. So you take these 2 out of circulation, there's only 98 more Jimmy Harts around. But something about him in all black like this, with, of course, Jimmy Hart written across the back, the big face on the back of the jacket, the megaphone, just absolutely fantastic. I know some people do gripe saying, oh, he's too tall, he's too tall. It doesn't bother me. It's still a great figure. Great representation of Jimmy Hart. The head sculpt, point blank, is one of the best. Out of all of these ones we're going to see, the Classic Superstars, I think, got the best head out of the bunch for Jimmy Hart. Just a very, very cool figure. A special one being 1 of 100, but even if it wasn't 1 of 100, out of all the Jimmy Harts, it would still be on this countdown. Just a very, very cool looking Jimmy Hart. And a little bit different than what we really think of when we think of Jimmy Hart. And that's why he comes in at number 5. Next up in our top 5 countdown of Jimmy the Mouth South Hart figures of all time, we go to Mattel. We go to the Elite line, of course, the Elite line running strong for over 10 years now. and they've given us a couple of different Jimmy Hart figures, but number 4 is going to the most recent offering for Jimmy Hart. It is the Royal Rumble Build-A-Figure, and I'm just a sucker for Jimmy Hart when he managed the Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine, the old Rhythm and Blues. Absolutely love that. That's how I have this paired in my collection next to Honky Tonk Man. Of course, you got the keyboard tie, the bright pink and black attack looking really good. That pink coat looks amazing. Of course, we've seen the megaphone before, so no changes there. You get the white glasses here. Just really good representation of Jimmy Hart from the time frame. And of course, like I said, it's the newest Jimmy Hart figure out there, and it was a Build-A-Figure. A perfect spot for managers, perfect spot for referees, suited characters, things like that is a Build-A-Figure. But a lot of people missed out on the old Jimmy Hart back in the day. They got another chance right here with this Build-A-Figure. A very, very good one. Very respectable. So respectable, it comes in at number 4 in my top 5 list. All right, we've hit the halfway point in our countdown here. You got your list together. Make sure you put it in the comments down below. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like I said, every single Thursday, we got a new countdown video. Top 5 this week, you know, top 10 when we hit 1,000 subscriber milestones. Dangerously close to 26,000 subscribers. So when we get there, we will do another top 10 video. So stay tuned to that. So number 3 is an interesting one. Some of you guys may have this. Some of you guys may not. I would have to think at the end of the day, this is the Jimmy Hart most people in the world. And as far as all of his figures that have ever sold, if they tallied it up, this would probably be the number 1 selling Jimmy Hart figure of all time, I would have to imagine. But I got my childhood nostalgia going on, and we're taking it all the way back to the LJN days for the LJN Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart. Very, very fun figure. I know a lot of kids, myself included at the time, as he won't stand. He's going to have trouble standing up. I remember as myself as a time when I was a kid, of course, I'd always buy the wrestlers first, but then you'd have the wrestlers, you'd go to your local Kmart, your KB Toys, your Toys R Us, wherever you might have went, and you wouldn't have a wrestler there you needed, so you're like, well, I got to get something. My parents are letting me get something. Well, it's time to get into another manager, and I remember getting Jimmy Hart, and I always loved this Jimmy Hart. Of course, the megaphone helped. It looks like Jimmy Hart. It's a great manager figure. You know, you have the Honky Tonk Man, you had Greg Valentine, you had the Hart Foundation, you had guys you could have with him, so that was fun to pair with. But he was so little, it was kind of fun to have your wrestlers throw him around the ring. Ultimate Warrior throwing him around, Andre the Giant, whoever it may be, throwing him around the ring. I always did enjoy those playing days when I was a little kid. Of course, there is 2 versions of the LJN Jimmy Hart variants. You got a microphone with no hearts. You got one with hearts. I just came across one of them. I can't remember which one is rare. I feel like maybe no hearts is rarer. I think so. But I do have both of them here in my collection. Now, this isn't going to be for everybody. I understand that. But that's why, at the end of the day, I always say it's my list. And that's where Jimmy Hart, LJN, lands on my list at number 3. Getting closer and closer to the number 1 spot as we are at number 2 now. And number 2 comes to us once again from Mattel. And I have a feeling a lot of you guys watching this, you might have this as the number 1 Jimmy Hart figure of all time on your list. But for me, it comes in at number 2. It is the Hall of Fame Target exclusive Mattel Elite Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart. And I would say a lot of people, when they close their eyes as their head hits their pillow at night and they think of Jimmy Hart, this is probably what they envision. This is what they come up with. And I couldn't say you're wrong, because that's how you do before you go to sleep. But this Jimmy Hart, very, very iconic. Of course, the white and the red, the hearts everywhere, the megaphone, the glasses, the haircut, the jacket. It's all here. This is Jimmy Hart to a T, and this is a great Jimmy Hart that I think everybody understands, everybody knows. Makes a lot of sense. It is a fabulous figure. The Build-A-Figure was built off of this one in a lot of ways, as this is the most iconic. That one, not quite as iconic, as cool as it is. Just a fabulous, fabulous representation in modern action figure form for Jimmy Hart. No doubt in my mind it had to be on the list, and it went all the way up to number 2. But what is number 1? Oh, it's going to be a surprise. We'll see there, but we're going to do it, and it's up next. All right, here we are at the number 1 spot in our top 5 Jimmy Hart countdown. You got your list together? Did you put it in the comments down below? Make sure you get that knocked out. Of course, make sure you like this video. It always helps when you give the old thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like I said, we're dangerously close, as of right now, to 26,000 subscribers. We will have a top 10 countdown when we hit that milestone. But the number 1 Jimmy Hart figure of all time, once again, we go back to my favorite wrestling line of all time. Gun to my head, once again. We're going to Classic Superstars. We're going to Classic Superstars Series 7 for the Mouth of the South Jimmy Hart. And like I said, the Classics line gave us a lot of Jimmy Harts. We got the Rhythm and Blues 3-pack, the Hart Foundation 3-pack, this one, of course. We've got the pink one, that was Rhythm and Blues, but no, we got the Mega Maniacs one with Hogan and Brutus, and we got the Nasty Boys one, so we got so many different ones there, but at the end of the day, it is the plain Jane Jimmy Hart. Now, this is very close to the Mattel Elite for me, but the difference here is I like the design of the jacket a little bit more colorful in the jacket, and then you get down to some beautiful pink shoes on this one that the other Jimmy Hart did not have. Of course, classic megaphone, and at the end of the day, like I keep saying, I feel the Classic Superstars head sculpt is the best representation of Jimmy Hart that was ever given to us in action figure form as of right now. Just a fabulous, fabulous one. Of course, Classic Superstars Series 7 is the series this one is from. And once again, just like that Mattel one, this is the one when most people close their eyes, think of Jimmy Hart. This is where their head goes to. This is what they think of, this type of outfit here. But you can't go wrong with any of these figures. Jimmy Hart, like I said, the manager, I have to believe, with the most wrestling figures of all time. I'm not even sure who second place would be. I'd have to do the math on that, but I'm fairly certain Jimmy Hart is #1. But is he #1 to you? Put your comments down below. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know your list in the comments down below, as I always do say. And of course, like, comment, subscribe on this video. Don't forget about the Patreon for early access to videos like this, bonus content, exclusive content, Q&As, you name it. A lot going on over there. And best of all, you do help the channel. You can also support the channel over at ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson. And don't forget about social media, SirPaul64, where you're going to find me on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So for the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, I am Kyle. See you guys all real soon.